Pablo Zapata, thank you for joining the program. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me.
We are entering the third year of war in Ukraine, unfortunately.
Yeah.
During this time, millions of people had to flee their homes, innocent people, civilians. At the very beginning, we were very welcoming here in Romania. Walk us through what's the situation with the Ukrainian refugees right now in the country. How have they integrated?
Well, indeed, it's a sobering time to be marking the second year of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine and of the more massive exodus that we have seen since the Second World War in the world. And currently there are 6.3 million Ukrainians who had to leave their country and are remaining outside, of which 5.9 million are in Europe and the others are elsewhere, mostly United States, Canada, other countries. In Romania, the figures are much smaller. There is about 78,000 refugees remaining in the country, which is a little bit less than what it was a year ago. But it's still, these are people who have remained here in the country throughout. There are still arrivals. If we see the figures of the Ministry of Interior, of the General Inspectorate for Immigration, we see that every month there is somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 new temporary protection or residence permits given to Ukrainians, but at the same time others are leaving the country. So the composition of the refugees remains pretty stable in terms of it is mostly women and children, 41% of women, 31% children, and about 27.5% males, adult males.
How many of these people want to stay forever in Romania?
Well, this is very interesting because we just 2 days ago we published the fourth iteration of intention survey throughout Europe, not only for Romania, not only for border countries, but throughout Europe. And the figures for Romania remain quite stable. The 92% of the refugees in the country declare that they want to return to Ukraine. 16% within the coming 3 months, and the rest when the conditions allow. Only a 3% declared that they don't see a way to return to their country. These are mostly people who have lost their houses in occupied territories, etc. But if we compare this with other countries of Europe, we see a difference between border countries with Ukraine and countries that are a bit farther away from Ukraine. The population staying in countries close to Ukraine have a tendency to wish to return more than the others. So if we see the total in Europe, it is about 65% of people who want to return. In the case of Romania, it's much higher, 92%.
And how does the number of refugees currently in the country compares to other European countries?
Well, there are countries with more refugees and countries with less refugees. Poland, Germany probably stand as countries that have welcomed hundreds of thousands of refugees that remain in their territory as well. For instance, Czech Republic. Other countries have both been a country of transit. Romania has welcomed millions of refugees through its territory on the way somewhere else, and welcoming even for a few days, it implies that there has been an effort in terms of providing first assistance, in terms of providing information, in terms of providing transport, etc. So by saying transit, it also entails a number of actions that have been taken by authorities, civil society and UN agencies like UNHCR.
At the very beginning, as I was saying, there was a huge support from the Romanian people towards the Ukrainian refugees. How would you assess the level of hospitality and generosity right now, after 2 years of war? Has it diminished? Has it vanished?
I think it's more than about the refugees themselves. It's about other concerns that people have in their lives. At some point, you recall 2 years ago, the whole country was welcoming refugees. In a way, people decided not to be watching at the news, but to be part of the news. And they left, if I may say this in a TV channel, they left the screen there and they went and took action. 2 years after, there are other issues that people are concerned about and are busy about. The support remains high in general, we would say. We did in UNHCR last year a public campaign, and we were a little bit concerned about which would be the reaction that we would get online. We got online in the feed of 12.5% of the Romanian population, 4.9 million people. And we were really looking closely at the reactions. most of the reactions, about 80%, were positive. Still 20% of the reactions were negative. It is very interesting because there was a difference between one and the other. The positive reactions were hearts, kudos, rainbows, etc. The negative were comments in many cases, and comments that look very similar one to the other.
So do you suspect some trolls?
No, well, I don't know. We don't have.
Trolls.
Well, we don't have the capacity to identify that. It could be that, or it could be what I think you communicators call the resonance box effect. So people talking in smaller groups, harmonizing somehow their messages, and then when they come out, the messages come out in a...
That's very much in line, though, with the Eurobarometer that showed that Romanians, surprisingly, made up the biggest percentage of people who were against humanitarian aid in the entire Europe. It was like 25%, if I remember correctly. How did we get there? 25% being against humanitarian aid?
I think there is a combination of factors. I think there is an element of misinformation and disinformation that is taking hold, and this is not only a concern in Romania. I think it's worldwide concern. Yesterday we look also at figures coming from the European Center for Foreign Relations in 12 countries of Europe. And in the case of Romania, 35% of the population identified refugees from Ukraine as a threat, whereas 13% identified them as an opportunity, and the others were, they really didn't see them as a threat, but also they didn't have a clear opinion. That's very interesting, because how did we get to a point where 78,000 refugees, most of which women and children, are perceived as a threat? Objectively, you cannot say what is the threat there. It is what I sometimes say is a problem that, or is a number of people that could fit in a football stadium. I am a fan of Real Madrid. The Real Madrid stadium has capacity for 83,000 people. There's 78,000 refugees from Ukraine in a country of about 20 million, like Romania.
Let me give you a concrete example, which maybe fuels the frustration of people. They go on the streets and they see these huge, expensive Ukrainian cars.
Yes.
They bump into Ukrainian people in fancy hotels. They see these fleshy Ukrainians, and then they assume that the entire community of refugees is the same.
Yes.
Do these people get money, for example, and does the state, do you have the tools necessary to assess if there's a real need or not?
Yes, we do. And it is very interesting because about a third of refugees from Ukraine never requested, either from the government or from international organizations like ours, our cash assistance. They never enrolled for these programs. These are people who came with their jobs, who came with vehicles. One, by the way, doesn't have to be poor in order to be a refugee. There is a misconception. There's people escaping generalized violence, or in this case, an invasion. And that doesn't have to do with the resources that one has or not in order to be considered refugee. But beyond the status that they may have in the country, which allows them to stay, they have come with their resources and they have come with their job. Also, if we see the figures of refugees working in Romania, the total figure of refugees that declare to be working is also 1/3. And that's quite interesting. Some of them are teleworking with their previous jobs. Other ones have found jobs in Romania. The issue of the cars, it's one of those things that one hears, as you were mentioning, it's very often.
Almost pervasive conception.
Exactly. And when we see a car of these characteristics in the street, we don't realize if we are walking, if we have passed along the way maybe 2 or 3 Ukrainian families that do not have a car, that is a mother and 2 children, with a bag, trying to make the end of the month and to buy the food that they can afford. So it is a refugee population maybe of contrast, but there are still quite a number of people that need assistance, that need help. We have come up with 17 other organizations in UNHCR with a common vulnerability scorecard, which means we will use the same glasses, the same lenses to look at the vulnerability of cases. And we are targeting, and we have already done that for months, targeting our assistance to the most vulnerable.
We only have 1 minute left,
Yes.
Mr. Zapata. There were also complaints from the refugees that actually need the money, that the government hasn't given them the money since last year in July. It was a complaint made in February, actually at the beginning of this month. What do you know about this topic, and how does this impact your work? Why has it happened?
Well, more than the why, I think the important element to highlight is that this is not only a situation, or the financial assistance is part of the Temporary Protection Directive that says that for refugees that do not have the means to survive, there will be programs of assistance by the governments. For us, the best assistance is not an extraordinary assistance, but is that refugees are integrated in the social protection plans available for all Romanians or foreigners legally residing in the country. In the case of these delays, the good news is that the money has started actually 2 days ago to be transferred to refugees, and it started already in 3 counties of Romania. And
what was the problem? What had happened?
Well, I think there was an allocation of budget, but that really would be our friends from the government able to give more information. But that was corrected, or that was addressed by the government through a memorandum, I think 3 weeks ago, and the payments are being effected.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zapata, for joining the program, and good luck in this year that's going to be equally complicated, I assume.
It is going to be complicated. Thank you very much for having us here.